Welcome to the debate. Today, we are tackling really one of the most persistent and defining domestic issues of our time, the intertwined crises of housing affordability, infrastructure capacity, and, well, urban stability. Our source material lays out two powerful, yet fundamentally distinct approaches to resolving these shortages.
And the conflict isn't just political, it's conceptual, right? Is the core failure a regulatory one, a lack of supply that has to be solved by deregulation and efficiency? Or is it more of a structural failure, a failure to treat housing as a fundamental social good, which would require, vast public investment and robust protection?
Exactly. So we are framing the central disagreement today like this. Is the optimal path to solving these housing and infrastructure challenges rooted in prioritizing market-led supply, deregulation, and execution efficiency? I'll be presenting the argument emphasizing supply, efficiency, and speed, what the material terms the Republican case.
And I will present the counterargument, insisting that housing is, in fact, a basic need. So I advocate for significant public investment, subsidized supply expansion, and essential tenant protections to ensure stability and equitable access, drawing from what's called the democratic case. Okay, so my core thesis is that the crisis is fundamentally a supply problem, and it's caused by institutionalized execution failure. We are failing because excessive regulation, from, say, environmental reviews like NEPA and SECA at the state level, right down to restrictive local zoning, it just chokes off production and drives up costs. The solution lies in cutting red tape, letting markets build, and introducing rigorous delivery discipline. This means tools like preempting local zoning to allow by-right construction, duplexes, small apartment buildings, ADUs, and implementing statutory shot clocks for faster permitting. That radically reduces the average time to build.
The speed you prioritize, though, while I agree it's necessary, it doesn't inherently guarantee the right kind of units get built, or that those units go to the people experiencing the greatest need. I mean, market forces will always primarily chase the highest return. Well, affordability, in my view, is best achieved through market filtering coupled with highly targeted subsidies. When I talk about filtering, I mean the process where, higher income households move into new, more expensive units, and this slowly frees up older, often mid-market housing, which then becomes relatively more affordable down the income ladder. We should focus on broad tax reforms like accelerated depreciation, reducing impact fees to lower construction costs universally, relying on targeted vouchers only for the most vulnerable families who, cannot be served by that filtering process. Our advantage here is harnessing private capital for rapid scale and, frankly, delivery predictability.
Right. I approach this from a very different foundational premise. Housing is a basic need, and infrastructure is a public good. Relying solely on the market, even a thoroughly deregulated one, it practically guarantees a deficit when it comes to deeply affordable units. The market will always skew development toward luxury unless public tools actively close that gap. So we must pair any pro-housing zoning with crucial tenant protections, things like just cause eviction, eviction defense, anti-gouging measures to mitigate the often devastating displacement that aggressive market shifts can spur.
But that emphasis on risk management, it comes at a cost, doesn't it? It slows the overall trajectory of correction. Displacement, while painful, is often a temporary social friction needed to correct decades of undersupply. And the protective regulations you advocate for, well, they frequently exacerbate the problem by acting as another soft barrier to investment.
We must champion the expansion of direct public and affordable supply, using existing tools like the Low-Income Housing Tax Credit, LIHT, which, gives private investors tax credits to fund deeply affordable housing, but also embracing innovative models like municipal or social housing and active land banking on public parcels. Furthermore, the crisis of chronic homelessness requires a targeted housing-first strategy combining supportive services, behavioral health access, and coordinated entry. Our strength is ensuring true affordability at the bottom and enhancing community connectivity through public investment in transit, sidewalks, complete streets, all of which dramatically lowers the total household cost of living.
Okay, let's focus on that tension, the tension between speed and regulatory risk in Clash 1. You seem to be elevating the fear of potential displacement above the proven efficiency of supply correction.
I see why you think that, but let me give you a different perspective. Speed and market certainty are the fastest path to filtering down prices for everyone. Look at deregulation examples, like the rollback of expensive parking minimums or streamlined ADU legalization. They demonstrate how infill units can be unlocked quickly and cheaply. Why burden that necessary speed with heavy protective regulations that raise hard costs and introduce regulatory uncertainty for developers, thus slowing the entire pipeline?
Well, the issue is that the filtering process you rely on is, frankly, notoriously slow and often fails completely in high-demand cities. Why? Because the development pipeline inevitably skews toward the most profitable luxury sector, leaving the deepest needs unmet for potentially decades. You risk trading a housing crisis for an immediate, avoidable eviction crisis.
That's a compelling argument about speed, but have you considered the ethical costs of displacement? If we legalize density, we must implement yes-and zoning packages, where density legalization was conditioned on the inclusion of mandatory tenant safeguards, like relocation payments or the right to return for displaced residents. Failure to do so means the most vulnerable bear the full cost of the policy change. If the goal is truly abundance, then we have to focus on minimizing every single barrier to construction, mandating relocation payments or imposing complex just cause eviction rules. It increases construction costs and introduces litigation risk. This acts as a persistent deterrent to building, which directly undermines our core goal of massive, rapid supply correction.
But the immediate social cost of displacement must be internalized. Otherwise, the policy is ethical and, I'd argue, practically flawed. We need to defend robust public investment and supply tools like LIHT precisely because they are necessary to close the gap where the market underbuilds. Moreover, affordability isn't just about rent, it's about total household expenses. We must invest heavily in pedestrian infrastructure, sidewalks, comprehensive transit to reduce car dependence, which is one of the largest financial burdens on working families. And the success of housing-first models in numerous cities, when paired with comprehensive services, proves the essential and efficient role of direct public delivery and support.
I am fundamentally unconvinced by the argument for relying on the public sector for rapid delivery. Historically, public builds are vulnerable to, well, bureaucratic complexity, project creep, cost overruns, and agonizingly slow delivery. I mean, the sheer inefficiency of the LIHTC process, for example, often results in deeply affordable units costing more and taking longer than comparable market-rate housing. Rather than relying on that model for massive infrastructure projects, we should be rigorously utilizing public-private partnerships, or P3s, for complex infrastructure.
P3s.
Yes, P3s, if structured and managed with disciplined contractual performance metrics, offer superior accountability and often guarantee on-time delivery compared to public sector slow delivery.
I'm not convinced by that line of reasoning, because P3s, if properly managed, offer superior accountability compared to public sector's slow delivery. Think of successfully delivered airport terminals, port expansions, or specific toll roads where the contract penalties for delay are steep enough to enforce efficiency.
I'm sorry, but I just don't buy that the P3 model's supposed efficiency is worth the inherent risks. Critics of the P3 model consistently highlight the dangers of privatizing gains while socializing potential financial losses or, long-term maintenance failures. The government often shoulders the debt risk while the private partner takes the profit. Furthermore, P3s often result in excessive user fees or tolls via long concession contracts, sometimes lasting 50 or 60 years, that prioritize fixed investor returns over fluctuating public need or equity. We are talking about building public goods here. They require public oversight that prioritizes equity, accessibility, and long-term public benefit over short-term investor yields.
Okay, let's move to the scope of affordability policy then. We must reiterate the Republican plank. Affordability is best tackled by cost control and narrowly targeted aid. We need to reduce mandates that raise unit costs, yes, but also focus on standardization and value engineering to lower construction costs per square foot broadly. By value engineering, I mean shifting away from expensive, bespoke, site-specific designs towards scalable, repeatable architectural and material models that generate predictable savings across multiple projects. This, coupled with vouchers, is the path forward.
Cost control is necessary for new units, I grant you that. But it does absolutely nothing to ensure stability in the existing, naturally occurring affordable housing stock where the vast majority of low-income families currently live. That requires policy beyond new construction, specifically targeted rent stabilization 2.0.
Rent stabilization.
Yes, and we must demand clarity on what that looks like. We need clear, explicit exemptions for new builds, often for the first 15 to 20 years, to ensure the policy doesn't chill future investment. We need transparent rules for capital improvement pass-throughs so owners can actually maintain their properties. And crucially, any stabilization must have a sunset clause explicitly tied to objective regional metrics, like, say, a sustained regional vacancy rate of 5% or higher, ensuring the policy self-eliminates once the housing shortage is genuinely resolved.
Okay, that's an interesting structural concession, tying the policy's existence to vacancy rates. But even rent stabilization 2.0, as you frame it, introduces deep regulatory complexity and uncertainty. Investors, especially large institutional capital, often simply refuse to enter markets where the rules governing their future returns are subject to shifting political mandates regardless of stated exemptions. Our focus must remain laser-focused on generating enough overall supply so that complex regulations aimed at limiting demand and managing scarcity simply become economically and politically unnecessary. Any policy that limits the total volume of construction is, in my view, counterproductive.
But if we don't protect existing tenants now, the social cost of displacement as new construction rolls out destabilizes communities and puts greater pressure on public services, regardless of how fast we build market-rate units elsewhere. Stability in existing housing is the bridge, really, to the future abundance you envision.
So our discussion really illuminates that we agree on the urgency and the necessity of increasing supply. But we diverge sharply on the methodology and the risk calculus. My conviction remains that the pathway to abundance requires maximizing efficiency first. Policies must prioritize cutting median permit time and dramatically lowering construction costs per square foot. By cutting regulatory friction, we harness the power of private capital, which is frankly the only engine large enough to correct this deficit quickly.
And my conviction is that speed must be inherently balanced with equity and stability. Success cannot only be measured by the number of units completed. Success must be measured by key indicators like displacement rates and the percentage of households that remain cost-burdened, spending 30% or more of their income on housing. We must insist on a robust subsidized supply pipeline and protective rules to achieve true stability and connectivity.
I do see high leverage overlaps, though, where both models can perhaps align. Tying major federal or state infrastructure grants for roads, transit, water to mandatory local zoning reforms near those transit hubs, for instance, that creates a powerful incentive structure that satisfies the need for density while simultaneously improving public goods delivery.
Absolutely. And using data transparency, things like public unit-by-unit pipeline trackers and cost-per-unit dashboards, allows us to rigorously evaluate and, importantly, sunset programs that demonstrably miss their targets. This forces accountability on both public sector delivery mechanisms and private P3 contracts. These two powerful perspectives, though distinct, they really do illuminate the complex reality of urban planning challenges that at the end of the day require every strategic tool available to achieve meaningful scale and equity.
Well said. There is certainly much more to explore within these competing frameworks.